The House will come back to order. Sorry, that was an awfully long 15 minutes, but the Chair apologizes, but I believe the time was productively spent in the respective caucuses. House Bill 562, the clerk will read.
Representatives Schaefer, Byrd, Cleveland, and Faircloth. House Bill 562, a bill to be entitled an act to amend various firearm laws. General Assembly of North Carolina enacts.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, for what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Schaefer, rise?
To debate the bill.
Lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Here we are again for our second day of debate on House Bill 562. Of course, we had several hours of debate yesterday, quite a few changes to the bill. However, would continue to ask for your support on this bill. I understand that there are a few amendments today that we'll be discussing, but as I said, I would ask you to vote green on the bill, and we'll look forward to hopefully not too long debate, but we'll see. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Harnett, Representative Lewis, rise?
Send forward an amendment.
The gentleman is recognized to send forth an amendment. The clerk will read.
Representative Lewis moves to amend the bill on page 6, line 25, through page 8, lines 42, by rewriting those lines to read.
The gentleman from Harnett has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, yesterday we had a series of amendments that were adopted that changed this bill quite substantially. Much work was done by central staff in the process of engrossing the bill last night so that the bill you would have on your dashboard would be the bill that we would be debating and considering amendments on today. There were 3 amendments that were in contrast to each other. The amendment that I offer today, I feel, adequately reflects the will of the House. What this amendment does is it clarifies that the amendment offered by Representative McNeil yesterday, which 77 members of this body voted for, the amendment offered by Representative McNeil yesterday, his intent was to preserve the pistol permitting process by the sheriffs exactly as it is today. That was his intent. That was what was discussed and debated on the floor of the House, and that's what 77 members of the House voted for. The amendment also deals with correctly placing the language that Representative Adams added, which says there'll be a uniform pistol purchasing permit with the raised seal in place, which passed the House 112-3. I would respectfully ask, simply so that we can clarify that the will of the House is reflected on the dashboard, that if you voted for the McNeil Amendment yesterday, which preserves the pistol permitting process for the sheriffs exactly as it is today, which was explained and thoroughly debated on the floor of the House, and if you voted for the Adams Amendment, which passed 112-3, that you vote for my amendment. If you want to be consistent and you voted against Representative McNeil's amendment yesterday, just vote no on this amendment. Mr. Speaker, I'll be glad to answer any questions if there are some.
The chair sees 2 lights. Are these lights on the amendment? For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Schaefer, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for Representative Lewis for bringing this technical amendment forward. As I've had a chance to speak with a few of you, I do want to make just a very important point about the nature of this technical amendment. Because of the way that things were passed yesterday between these 3 amendments, part of Representative Lewis's original amendment still stands on the bill. It is on page 6. Lines 25 through 27. And the effect of that is that it is the exemption for handgun purchases at a federally licensed firearms dealer. The point here is that if you vote for this amendment, then you will be voting, if you vote for the current amendment, then you will be voting to take out that exemption. In effect, what that would be doing is taking out the partial repeal. So if there are members that are in this chamber that support any form of repeal of the pistol permit process, then you should vote no against this amendment. As I support a full repeal of the pistol permit process, but I'm open certainly to partial repeal, I would urge members to vote against this amendment. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Randolph, Representative McNeil, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Lewis. You did a really good job of explaining what happened. I want to take just a second, and I'll be brief. What happened in the House yesterday was a series of amendments. Representative Lewis's was first. It made certain changes. When mine came along second, it basically trumped his. When it was passed, my amendment was passed, it basically technically did away with his. Now, when the bill was drafted, that did not show. So we decided, and we talked to staff about running a technical amendment to straighten that out. Now, I think it's being used by the bill sponsors to try and muddy the water. So if you voted for my amendment yesterday, I would appreciate your green vote again today. That will make everything consistent. Thank you.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the adoption of Amendment 10 sent forth by Representative Lewis. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Representative McNeil, does the gentleman wish to record on this vote? 75 having voted in the affirmative and 40 in the negative, the amendment is adopted. For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Earl, rise?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to change my vote on House Bill 168 to a yes.
Could the lady please repeat the bill number?
168.
168, the lady wishes to be recorded as having voted aye. There were two votes. There was a second reading and a third reading. Does the lady wish to be recorded aye on both votes?
Yes.
Okay. Lady will be so recorded.
Thank you.
Representative Adams, the chair understands that the member is wishing to withdraw that amendment and replace it with a substitute amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. Is it on the...
Representative Adams is recognized to send forth an amendment. The clerk will read.
Representative Adams moves to amend the bill on page 15, lines 16 through 25 by rewriting those lines to read.
And members, the gentleman did amend the amendment. You'll notice the lines are just to make sure members understand that the amendment originally had another sentence that begins with investigation. I believe the member has stricken through that, so the actual part of the amendment the members will be considering would be the language beginning at no person. The gentleman from Cadaba has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment specifies that mental health providers or governmental entities cannot charge additional fees to an applicant for a background check for a concealed carry permit. And in no case may the sheriff take longer than 90 days to either deny or approve the permit.
Further discussion, further debate. For what purpose does the gentleman from Randolph, Representative McNeil, rise?
Thank you. To ask the amendment, I'm going to sponsor a question.
Does the gentleman from Catawba yield to the gentleman from Randolph?
Yes.
He yields.
So, Representative Adams, let me ask you a question on your amendment. Does your amendment mean that if someone who has a mental health record and they apply for a pistol permit, they would still get their permit even though they have a mental health record just because the sheriff wasn't able to get the records in 90 days?
But the sheriff can deny the permit.
Further discussion, further debate. For what purpose does the gentleman from Cumberland, Representative Glazier, rise?
May I ask Representative McNeil a question, please?
Does the gentleman from Randolph yield to the gentleman from Cumberland?
I do.
He yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative. I'm trying to figure out your question, the answer Representative Adams gave, and my reading. So I'm going to ask you it this way. Is it your understanding in looking at this amendment that if a sheriff doesn't get records in time or takes longer than 90 calendar days when the application is submitted, that the permit would be deemed approved? That is, it takes any capacity to deny it away from the sheriff?
The way I read it is that it says, in no case may the sheriff take longer than 90 days from the date when the application was submitted to issue or deny a permit under this section. So I assume with what Representative Adams' answer was that the sheriff could deny it at the end of 90 days if he didn't have the records.
Well, does the gentleman wish to ask an additional question?
Follow-up, yes.
And does the gentleman from Randolph yield to an additional question? He yields.
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative. So your view would it be correct then to say that if a sheriff is coming close to the 90-day period and doesn't know, that this sort of forces the sheriff, because they might need a few more days, to be cautious and therefore deny someone who might otherwise really be approved if they had a few more days, but out of an abundance of caution, because they're limited by 90, they're going to have to deny? Would this not mean that, in fact, it's sort of counterintuitive? That is, if a sheriff has a concern but doesn't have time to determine the concern, they're almost going to have to deny out of a safety view. Would that not happen?
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the floor to answer the question.
All right, thank you. Representative Glazier, I just saw this amendment basically when it appeared on the dashboard, so I'm kind of reacting to it too. I tend to agree with what your premise is now that I read the last sentence, because the last sentence says a permit shall not be denied unless the applicant is determined to be ineligible. And you know, if a sheriff doesn't have the information back in 90 days, and then with that last sentence, he couldn't deny it because he wouldn't know whether they're ineligible or not. So I think it's kind of conflicting language, but I'm not the attorney in the room, so.
May I speak to the amendment, Mr.
The gentleman from Cumberland has the floor to debate the amendment.
Well, we all are just kind of reading it, and I do think it's conflicting language. And on the one hand, the second last sentence would suggest that someone would have a cause of action or be able to avoid a sheriff denying a permit if it occurred after 90 days. That seems clear to me. But if they can't deny it under the last sentence unless they're determined to be ineligible, that creates a real problem if the sheriff doesn't get the information back to make the decision within 90. So I think a sheriff is going to be caught between a rock and a hard place under this, one way or the other, and at least the language appears to be at a minimum conflicting. But I think in the end it may actually cause a sheriff under the second last sentence to deny before the 90 days if they're not going to be able to get the information under the basis that the best they can do is determine in their discretion that they're ineligible, but then they run into a problem with the last sentence. I don't know what I would do if I'm the sheriff under this provision. For all of those reasons, because I think it's very unclear what its effect is going to be, at a minimum, I would urge members to vote against the amendment.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Durham, Representative Michaud, rise?
To speak on the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
I think it's very clear to me what this amendment says. The last sentence says it in a nutshell. A permit shall not be denied, unless the applicant is determined to be ineligible pursuant to GS 14-415.12. In other words, if the sheriff does not get that information back, he cannot deny that permit. And that's exactly what it's saying.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Gaston, Representative Torbett, rise?
Ask the gentleman from Cumberland a question.
Does the gentleman from Cumberland yield to the gentleman from Gaston?
Yes, Mr.
Yields.
Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Glazier, not being an attorney, knowing that you're a fine, accomplished one, there was talk and language about not receiving information. We seem to be looking over the first paragraph. Does it not say that all this transpires after the receipt of the required records? Can you help me with that from the legal aspect?
Well, I'm reading it as you are, Representative Torbett. And receipt.
Inquiry of the chair, Mr. Speaker.
Well, let me answer the question.
Just a moment, Representative Glazier. For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Jeter, rise?
Inquiry of the chair.
The gentleman may state his inquiry.
May I suggest that this amendment be temporarily displaced so that we can get some clarity on what it
The
does?
chair was about to make that suggestion so that the attorneys in the room can consult and come up with a legal opinion. We're going to move forward to, I believe Representative Pittman has sent forth an amendment, ALH 41. The chair has reviewed the amendment, has also consulted with Representative Pittman. The chair rules the amendment out of order. The chair has reviewed two additional amendments that will be summarily ruled out of order. One is ASA 47, sent forth by Representative Harrison. The amendment is not germane to the bill, is ruled out of order. The other amendment is ASA 62, sent forth by Representative Meyer. The amendment is ruled out of order. The amendments will be returned to the members. The Representative Speciale is recognized to send forth an amendment. The clerk will read.
Representative Speciale moves to amend the bill on page 8, lines 42 through 43 by inserting the following between those lines.
The gentleman from Craven has the floor to debate the amendment.
What this will do is if you get denied your permit and you fight it, you appeal it because that's your only option. If you win your appeal, that you get reimbursed for your your legal fees. There's some question about whether it is or isn't already in the law, but because looking at it, we're going over with Representative Stam, looking at it, I'm convinced that doesn't necessarily include this. It may or may not, but I want to make sure, okay, that for example, if I have to fight to get my permit because for whatever reason, if I prevail, that my lawyer fees should be given back to me. Again, it may already be in the law, but the law as it's written is ambiguous. This will clarify it. So I ask for your support.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wake, Representative Stam, rise?
To speak on the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, members of the House, my opposition to this really doesn't have anything to do with about guns, but rather geometry. Symmetry. I believe in symmetry in the law. And as those members who have been on Judiciary 2 for the last few years know, whenever somebody comes up with an idea for attorney's fees to be paid by one party or the other, I usually suggest that sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander. England has a loser pay rule. America has a general rule that you pay your own attorneys, and that's a good idea. We have a lot of exceptions for it. A lot of exceptions, but usually they're symmetrical. For example, later on in the same bill, on page 14, about the middle of the page, lines 22 to 26, there's a provision that if you're adversely affected by an ordinance, rule, or regulation about this subject, that either side can get reasonable attorney's fees, the prevailing party. My objection to this particular one is that it's not symmetrical. Now, there are already three different ways in which either side, in this case, can get attorney's fees. One is Rule 11, which is part of our Rules of Civil Procedure. Another one is 6-21 point something or other, 4 or 5. And then the third one is a law that Representative Brawley got passed about 3 years ago. And in each case, without going into the details of it, if the position of the government is unreasonable, you can get your attorney's fees. That's the long and short of it. So I would ask you to defeat this for lack of geometric symmetry.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Blust, rise?
Speak on the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I would support the amendment simply following what Representative Stam just said, symmetry. There is no symmetry when the individual out there is going against the government, when the individual has to hire his own attorney and the government's already got attorneys on staff that the taxpayer supports. Therefore, there isn't symmetry. That's a hard thing for people to have to do. I see it in the tax arena all the time. It's to take on a government that has a legal staff already in place, that whether the government wins or not, their lawyers are paid for already in the budget, but the citizen has to expend extra funds to go against this government. So I support the amendment.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ash, Representative Jordan, rise?
Debate the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
I would respectfully disagree with my colleague from Wake, Representative Stam, and I would also support this amendment using symmetry and using geometry, and that would be the four corners of the page. The sheriff has full discretion whether to deny this permit, and there's a list of qualifications. It's in the sheriff's power to make sure that he denies based upon the law. If he does not, we need to have this sitting here in the four corners of the page right there with the same law on this permit that says if you turn this permit down and you're outside of your discretion, you're going to have to pay a price for it. So you better carefully consider the decision you are making and whether or not those attorney fees can be gotten some other way, like Representative Stam says. If we have it in the four corners of the page, it'll be right there in front of the sheriff when they're looking at the permit. I think that's what the most important thing to look at for this amendment is. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Wake, Representative Avila, rise?
To ask Representative Stam a question.
Does the gentleman from Wake yield to the lady from Wake?
I do.
He yields.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mine has to do a little bit along the line, somewhat of the argument that Representative Jordan just made in the fact that it refers to counties and municipalities. And the sheriff has the authority to make these decisions. How is he controlled by the county in terms of the execution of his duties, and that the county would be held responsible rather than the sheriff? It may be kind of a implied sort of tie-in, but I'm wondering, is that kind of a...
If I could get clarification on the question, are you referring to page 14?
Yes, I am.
Yes, I was using that as an example of how we normally have it go both ways. I don't think it directly relates to this denial of a permit, but on a denial of a permit, there are three different ways in which Representative Speciale could get attorney's fees, not that one. Rule 11, Rule 6-21.5, I believe, and then the law that Representative Brawley got passed about 3 years ago, but not that one.
Okay, thanks.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Cabarrus, Representative Pittman, rise?
Speak on the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, there are a few judges who are friends of mine, so I hope if they're listening in, they don't take this personally. But sometimes judges even misinterpret what we've put in law. Sometimes we have to go back and make clarifications because we didn't make it clear enough to start with. And to me, this is a matter of just further clarification to make it clear that this does apply to the sheriffs. And as has already been said, Representative Jordan said, make sure that you really have a good reason. You're not just frivolously denying this permit. I've heard stories of sheriffs, and I'm not going to name them, but I've heard stories of sheriffs denying a permit because the person had previously been married to a relative of that sheriff, and they'd been divorced, and he just didn't think the guy was a good character because they had that situation. Things like that. We need to make sure that the sheriffs are denying permits if they have to on good reasons, not something frivolous. And I think this is just a little urging them to do that and clarifying that the person who's been denied, if it's wrongfully done, does have recourse. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Randolph, Representative McNeil, rise?
To ask Representative Stam a question.
Does the gentleman from Wake yield to the gentleman from Randolph?
I do.
He yields.
Representative Stam, I appreciate your explanation a while ago. I was just kind of wondering how far this could go. If a person was charged with a crime in district court and the judge found him guilty, but then he was found not guilty in superior court, would we have an action on the judge to pay for our extra lawyer bills? If we as legislators pass a law that's later found out being unconstitutional, could we be held liable under this same theory that we cause somebody harm? I just wondering how far this could go.
Well, that's the good part of the American law, is you pay your own lawyer, which you can negotiate with. I have seen in fee-shifting cases, I have seen humongous bills where people are charging $600 an hour and charging hundreds of thousands of dollars for cases for which there's never even a trial, because it's being shifted to someone else. And usually it's the state that ends up paying that, because those are the types of cases involved. I just don't think it's necessary to do that kind of fee shifting, and it can go, to your example, it can go everywhere.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Brawley, rise?
I wondered if Representative Speciale would yield for some questions.
Does gentleman from Craven yield to the gentleman from Mecklenburg?
I yield.
He yields.
Thank you, Representative. I notice in here it says if the sheriff's denial of the application is overturned upon appeal, the sheriff shall reimburse the applicant for court costs and reasonable attorney fees. Does this mean that the sheriff is personally liable for these expenses?
Personally, no, that's not what the intent is. The intent is that the sheriff, he has funds in his at his disposal to take care of this.
If I may ask the gentleman a second question.
Does the gentleman yield to an additional question?
I yield.
He yields.
Thank you, sir. We did discuss earlier a bill that, yes, I introduced House Bill 687, which was passed into Session Law 2011-299. It amended Article 3 of Chapter 6 of the General Statutes by putting in a new section that said attorneys' fees, cities and counties acting outside the scope of their authority. And it created a situation where if anyone prevailed in an action against a city or a county, and the judge determined that the city or the county had abused their authority or their discretion, that they would be eligible for attorneys' fees and costs. And, I think you expressed the opinion that this did not apply to the sheriff, and there is some question about that. Sir, what I would ask you is the issuance of a pistol permit the only issue where if a sheriff exceeds his authority, he should be liable for court costs and lawyers' fees?
The gentleman has the floor to respond.
That's not my issue. My issue is the permit. So I can't answer that question.
To debate the bill, sir?
The gentleman from Mecklenburg has the floor to debate the amendment.
Excuse me, yes, debate the amendment. Mr. Speaker, it would seem to me that a more prudent course of action for this body is if the sheriff is not covered by this bill, we should be amending the general statutes to bring the sheriff under it for all of his abusive actions and not just for a pistol permit. And if I may, I would like to ask Representative Glazier a question if he would yield.
Does the gentleman from Cumberland yield to the gentleman from Mecklenburg?
Sure.
He yields.
Representative Glazier, please have no fear, sir. It is a sign of respect for your ability in constitutional law. The amendment, as stated, said the sheriff would be liable. Would it be your opinion that the courts would interpret that to be the individual or the office of the sheriff?
That actually is a really good question, because we have an unusual statute in North Carolina that requires the sheriff to have a surety. And so when you sue the sheriff, you must also sue the surety, or you can have your case dismissed. It's a bizarre, anachronistic statute, but it's there. And so sometimes the sheriff is sued in his official capacity or her official capacity, and sometimes in their individual capacity. And so you always have to designate on your pleading what you're doing. It's not, I'm not trying to sort of punt the question, but it is a good question because there's no easy answer under North Carolina law, and it involves the surety. So we're also talking about the surety being involved. Beyond that, I really can't answer your question. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, being perplexed by the situation, I will sit down and discuss it no further.
Representative Raleigh, did the sheriff, did the gentleman sue the sheriff but not the deputy? For what purpose does the gentleman from Craven, Representative Speciale, rise?
To speak again on the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
I want to clarify one thing. We heard Representative Stam talk about excessive fees and everything. If you look at the amendment, it says reasonable attorney fees, not hundreds of thousands of dollars. Reasonable attorney fees. The other thing with regard to what Representative Brawley brought up, I believe, if I wrote it down correctly, the phrase was outside the scope of their authority or something similar to that. If cities and towns acted outside, the sheriff denying your permit is not acting outside the scope of his authority. He has the authority to deny that permit. The question is he doing it justifiably or not? Is he doing it because he doesn't like me? Is he doing it because, for whatever reason? And so if the only option that I have is to appeal this through the courts, if I win that appeal, which is going to cost me money, then it's only fair that I get my attorney fees back. The reference by Stam that England has the loser pays, it's that kind of silly stuff that caused us to whip them and become a country on our own. So we don't subscribe to what England does. This is America. I want to remind you, okay, of the history of the permit, which is why we were trying to get rid of it in the first place. This is a Jim Crow era permit that was designed to keep minorities from getting it and to keep Republicans from getting guns. Okay? Do your history, don't laugh, do your research. And this is precisely why this is necessary, okay? Because they have that arbitrary power to determine whether or not you are of good moral character. And that was the catchphrase that they could use to deny anybody they chose a pistol permit. Y'all are laughing on that side. I find this amusing, okay, considering it was the Democrat Party that brought this thing up in the first place. So anyway, I don't mean to demean you, but again, I don't like being laughed at. I don't appreciate that. This is serious business. People are being persecuted. People are being denied permits. Women, there are cases where people have died because they've been denied a permit on some arbitrary reason, and they had someone stalking them. You know it, and I know it. There was one case brought up the other day about some lady in the news. Let's use some common sense here. That's the purpose of this. If we're going to keep that permit, let's make sure that if we use that avenue of appeal, which is all we have, to appeal it to the courts, that if they prevail and it was frivolous or whatever it may be, that they can get their attorney fees. And I ask that you support this.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Dare, Representative Tyne, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And during the discussion, the question about whether or not the sheriff could be personally liable or not, I just went back and asked staff. And staff said because of the ambiguity of the language, that yes, based on the arguments in the court and the decision by the judge, yes, they could be held personally liable. So I just wanted to answer the question that had been asked by several members.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Durham, Representative Michaud, rise?
To speak on the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
And it's just for clarification. The denial of the permit is within the scope of the sheriff's authority. The giving of the permit is within the scope of the sheriff's authority. It is only when extrinsic circumstances arise that go outside of that scope of authority that he may be held liable.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Cumberland, Representative Floyd, rise?
Mr. Speaker, to see if Representative Stan would yield for a question.
Does the gentleman from Wake yield to the gentleman from Cumberland?
I do.
He yields.
Representative Stan, on line 5, they use reasonable attorney fee. The question that I have for you, what is considered per hour is reasonable attorney fee?
It's the lodestar is the market fee in the area.
Just a moment. For what purpose does the gentleman from Johnson, Representative Daughtry, rise?
Try to help answer the question.
Does the gentleman from Wake yields the floor? Gentleman from Cumberland wish to redirect the question to the gentleman from Johnston?
I do.
And the gentleman from Johnston, I believe, has indicated he would be glad to respond. The gentleman from Johnston has the floor to answer the question.
It depends on who you hire.
Mr. Speaker?
For what? For what purpose?
May I redirect my question to Representative Stan?
I yield.
He yields.
On line 5, the word reasonable attorney fee.
The lodestar is the starting point is the market rate for that type of attorney in that area, enhanced by success or failure, reduced by unnecessary work, enhanced by the novelty of the claim, reduced by portions of the. It's very complex. I've participated in helping prepare affidavits for it for out-of-state attorneys, and I've seen the state of North Carolina pay about $600,000 in reasonable attorney's fees for a case that never had a trial, many motions, lots of depositions, and it can get up there if you hire expensive counsel. If you hire somebody like me, it's cheap.
And follow up, Mr. Speaker.
I yield.
Follow up, Mr. Speaker.
He yields. The gentleman's recognized to state an additional
Since
question.
you said you're reasonable per
I'm reasonable.
hour, the fee.
But
that's the fee.
Yes, I'm reasonable. Yes, but many fee applications are for huge amounts that would shock your conscience.
Mr. Speaker.
Yes, for what additional purpose does the gentleman rise?
To debate the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, the reason why I raised that question, and this is unbeknown and unforeseeable consequence to our various county boards commission or the individual sure himself or herself, that this fee is going to be assessed to the county board of commissioners. And so it's an unknown fee, and I'm just concerned about the cost that is passed on to the residents in my district. So, that reasonable fee just raises a flag, to me as I go back to my county and share with my county board of commissioners that this may be passed on to them.
Members, the chair is aware that Representative Speciale is doing a perfecting amendment that was, as I understand, and the gentleman is drafting the amendment, but just in the interest of time, I believe he is going to change it so that I believe he's going to change on line 15 where the words, it starts out, if the sheriff's denial of the application is overturned upon appeal, the sheriff shall reimburse. I believe the gentleman is changing sheriff to county. Is that correct? The county of the sheriff. The gentleman is drawing a perfecting amendment to his amendment. I'll let him send forth the perfecting amendment, then we will vote on the perfecting amendment. Let's do this. We're going to displace the amendment, but I would ask members when we come back on this amendment to, if we could avoid the full debate that we've had on the amendment itself, unless someone really feels moved by the Spirit to speak on it right now. For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Alexander, rise?
For a question.
To whom is the question directed, sir?
To you, sir.
Jim was recognized for inquiry to the chair.
If I'm following this correctly, wouldn't that amendment, as he is proposing to perfect it, require a fiscal note?
It would not require a fiscal note because it would not result in a cost to the state of North Carolina. Certainly there could be some potential cost to counties, but under our rules on a fiscal note, it would not be a cost that would affect the state. So it would not require a fiscal note. But not a bad question, but the answer is no. The chair is going to temporarily displace it. I see Representative Speciale working with staff in the back on that. But again, the intention of the chair is to come back and simply adopt the perfecting amendment, which I don't imagine would be controversial, and then actually have a vote on the substantive amendment that's there. The gentleman from Catawba, Representative Adams, is recognized to withdraw his previous amendment, and I believe the gentleman has a revised amendment. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The gentleman, the original amendment's returned. The revised amendment will be read by the clerk.
Representative Adams moves to amend the bill on page 15, lines 16 through 25 by rewriting those lines to read.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to comment that I appreciate Representative Glazer's assistance with this. We've come to the conclusion that the language should read, the sheriff shall make the request for any records concerning the mental health or capacity of the applicant within 10 days of receipt of the items listed in General Statute 14-15.13. No person, company, mental health provider, or governmental entity may charge additional fees to the applicant for background checks conducted under this subsection. And the language that follows is already in the bill. A permit shall not be denied unless the applicant is determined to be ineligible pursuant to General Statute 14-415.12.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Craven, Representative Speciale, rise?
To request to withdraw that amendment and replace it with the correct amendment.
Okay. We've actually displaced the gentleman's amendment. We're on Representative Adams' amendment, but we'll come back to the member shortly. For what purpose does the gentleman from Cumberland, Representative Glazier, rise?
To speak to the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Adams. And I do agree with Representative Adams' perfecting amendment. I think it gets at the problem he's trying to do, get at narrowly, but doesn't create the problem on the back end. As I understood what Representative Adams was trying to do was to make sure that the sheriff doesn't sandbag the application by delaying the request for the records. And this says you got to request the records within 10 days. Actually, the bill had a similar provision in a different place. This just puts it in the section that Representative Adams was concerned about. But it then says the fee provision, which is fine, and it says the same thing the bill has always said, which is can't be denied unless it meets the criteria. But what it doesn't do, what we've taken out, is the problem that the prior amendment created, where it was no delay by the sheriff sent it off, but delay in getting the records, and he's barred if he gets the records late on the 90-day prohibition. This takes that 90-day and the back-end limit off. It creates the solution to the problem up front, and I concur and would encourage people to vote for the amendment.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ash, Representative Jordan, rise?
Inquiry of the amendment, sponsor.
Does the gentleman from Catawba yield to the gentleman from Ash? He yields.
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Representative Adams. I have a question, and it might be because of my particular counties or something. We have a separate mental health organization that handles these. So when I went to my sheriff to get my concealed carry, I had to go to this other entity to get the mental health check, and they charged me $15 or something. Your statement here says no person, company, mental health provider, et cetera, may charge additional fees. Now, does that mean they can't charge me anything because I've already paid a permit to the sheriff? Or are you meaning they can't charge me anything above what they would normally charge someone coming in for a regular mental health check because I'm getting it for some specific reason? Does that make sense?
That would be subject to interpretation. I can't interpret that here.
Follow up?
Does the gentleman yield to an additional question?
Well,
does the gentleman from Catawba yield to an additional question?
Yes.
He yields?
Well, that answer actually concerns me because now we need to make sure of what's actually going on. The sheriffs are not going to say, do you agree that the sheriffs will be concerned about this language of extra fees if it's coming from another entity?
The sheriffs will be concerned about the fees?
If they are accused of charging extra fees because it came from a different entity.
Well, my presumption would be that the sheriffs couldn't charge any additional fees. The county couldn't charge any additional fees.
Okay.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the passage of Amendment 13 offered by Representative Adams. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Representative Reeves, gentleman wish to record. The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 96 having voted in the affirmative and 19 in the negative. The amendment is adopted. Now I believe the gentleman for Representative Speciale, the gentleman I believe has prepared a revised amendment to replace the earlier amendment, I believe. Is that correct? The gentleman's original amendment will be returned to the gentleman and will be replaced with the new amendment that has now been sent forth. The clerk will read.
Representative Speciale moves to amend the bill on page 8, lines 42 through 43 by inserting the following between those lines.
The gentleman from Craven has the floor to debate briefly debate the revised amendment.
The change on this is
the gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I really have concern with line 15 with the word inserting that the county be responsibility for paying the debt. I think that this is an unfunded mandate for the county that has not appropriated money for this particular purpose.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the adoption of Amendment 14 sent forth by Representative Speciale. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 54 having voted in the affirmative and 61 in the negative. The amendment fails. The lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Cunningham, is recognized to send forth an amendment. The clerk will read.
Representative Cunningham moves to amend the bill on page 14, line 27 through page 15, line 15 by deleting those lines.
The lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment would remove Section 13, which would require North Carolina law enforcement to approve applications for machine guns and other powerful weapons, which would revoke their authority to deny these guns to people who pose a danger to public safety. And it also weakens the federal law that relies on police and sheriffs to fulfill their important role. The background information on this section for those type of weapons are that for over 80 years, the federal law has regulated machine guns and short-barrel rifles and shotguns. Any person who wants to purchase an automatic weapon must seek certification from local law enforcement. Local law enforcement makes the determination whether the applicant is to be prohibited from possession of an automatic weapon and that the applicant is not likely to use the gun illegally. At present time, the local authority acts as a backstop against putting powerful weapons such as machine guns into the wrong hands. Our local law enforcement personnel are in the best position to know whether an applicant has a violent history or the presence of additional information in an applicant's history that would trigger concern. This morning I did make a call to the Sheriff's Association Director, Mr. Caldwell, and they are also concerned about this provision in the bill, and they are in support of the amendment. I ask for your support. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Schaefer, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to oppose this amendment, and Representative Cunningham, thank you for bringing it to our attention. However, I'm afraid that there is some misunderstanding about what this section actually does. The federal law requires that the local law enforcement, whether it's the sheriff or whoever is designated by federal law, once an individual who is applying to obtain a certain type of firearm that is regulated by federal law, the law requires that that law enforcement official sign off on it. In addition to getting the law enforcement officer's signature, there are a lot of other hoops that the applicant has to jump through. The final thing is getting that sheriff to sign off on that certification. What this section does is it simply says that the sheriff shall make that certification whether they're issuing it or denying it within 15 days. It is very similar to the provision that we were just looking at with concealed carry permits. You know, basically, we do not want these law enforcement officials sandbagging these applications. When an applicant has gone through all of the required prerequisites for getting to obtain this firearm, the last step for them is to get the law enforcement official to sign off on it. This is simply asking the sheriff to make his or her decision in a timely manner. It's asking them to make that decision within 15 days, whether they're going to issue that, whether they're going to give that certification, or whether they are going to deny it. They are going through the same research in terms of whether they should have it or whether they should not have it. It does not weaken federal law. That's quite frankly impossible. It is simply asking our sheriffs and our local law enforcement officials to apply the federal law for firearms that are governed by federal law. Thank you. I ask you to oppose the amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the passage of Amendment 15 offered by Representative Cunningham. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 40 having voted in the affirmative and 74 in the negative. The amendment fails. The lady from Buncombe, Representative Fisher, is recognized to send forth an amendment. The clerk will read.
Representative Fisher moves to amend the bill on page 14, lines 21 through 26 by rewriting those lines to read.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The lady does have the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, this amendment would protect cities and towns that might have stronger laws than the states as far as what would protect their citizens and their towns and their cities from lawsuits brought by organizations who maybe support a less strong law. The bottom line, what we're doing is taking out the punitive preemption language in Section 12H and in Section 15, I believe. And that would keep other out-of-state groups from being able to sue the mayors or the town councils of cities or towns in North Carolina, because we have seen instances already where out-of-state entities are suing local cities and towns because they were just trying to protect their citizens. Now, this is an instance where the citizens of North Carolina would have to pay for these lawsuits, for the attorney fees and for bringing these suits. So I think that it would be in the state's best interest and in the taxpayers' best interest if we do support this amendment, and I encourage your favorable support. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Schaefer, rise?
To debate the amendment.
Lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you again, Representative Fisher. Representative Fisher brought this amendment to me yesterday, and I always appreciate the heads up on that. I do respectfully ask the members to oppose this amendment. One of the things that we have tried to do over the last few years is to really enforce that statewide uniformity of laws. What we have seen, despite the fact that we have been very clear in the past few versions of our firearms legislation in past sessions, we've really tried to make it clear to cities and towns what they are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do. Unfortunately, there are some cities or counties, et cetera, that are not following what we have said, and so we have been searching for a way to keep accountability and to protect individuals' rights, what we have established as the General Assembly. If we pass this amendment, we will remove that ability to do that. So I would ask for the members to oppose this amendment and allow us to have that uniformity and really keep it in place. Thank you, and please vote no.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Jeter, rise?
To see if Representative Fisher would yield for a question.
Does the lady from Buncombe yield to the gentleman from Mecklenburg?
I yield.
She yields.
Thank you, Representative Fisher. My question is, what examples are you trying to capture? I'm trying to understand your amendment. What would a city have done that would be captured by your amendment, for lack of a better way of saying things?
Well, if we are allowing more access to guns for citizens in local towns and cities, then we are we could predict maybe a higher incidence of gun violence in a city or a town, and where mayors and police are trying to keep their town or city safer than maybe what our law in North Carolina might enable them to do. This would keep them then from being sued by some outside entity who thought that maybe our town or city was being too stringent in gun safety laws. For example, one of the states that we know of that had this similar punitive preemption language in their law was had a suit filed against it from places as far away as Texas and Virginia. This was in Pennsylvania. They had the same language in their bill, and because there were some towns and cities in Pennsylvania that wanted to be a little more stringent in protecting their citizens, they opened themselves up to lawsuits from other states. And then the people in that state, the taxpayers, are having to foot the bill to fend off those lawsuits coming from Texas and Virginia. It opens the door for lawsuits from other places. And I think that we are in the business here to not only protect our citizens and keep them safe, and that's what our mayors and our city councils and our police and sheriffs and all of those folks are doing, but we are also responsible to our citizens in terms of what they are bound to pay for in terms of lawsuits, the cost of lawsuits. Does that
follow up?
Does the lady yield to an additional question?
I yield.
She yields.
In this hypothetical situation, let's say the town of Huntersville, the greatest town in North Carolina,
no doubt,
passed a law that said you couldn't have concealed carry. Is that permissible currently?
I don't think that that's permissible, but I think that they probably would have laws in place that would prohibit guns in certain places in a city or a town.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Union, Representative Arp, rise?
See if Representative Fisher would ask a question, please.
Does the lady from Buncombe yield to the gentleman from Union?
I yield.
She yields.
Thank you, Representative Fisher. I'm trying to wonder how this is different from lawsuits that are brought on to cities by outside groups as it relates to, say, religious freedoms, prayer before council, or other types of things. Can you address that and how this would be different?
In fact, I am not an attorney, And so I'm not really sure what the differences might be. I'm sorry, I can't answer that.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nash, Representative Collins, rise?
To briefly debate the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
The section in question clearly says a person adversely affected by any ordinance, rule, or regulation promulgated or caused to be enforced by any county or municipality in violation of this section may bring an action for declaratory and injunctive relief and for damages. What we're trying to make sure of here is the purpose of this bill and others that we've passed since I've been here in the last 5 years is to ensure that the citizens of the state of North Carolina are afforded their proper Second Amendment rights. It is not the place of a city or county to deny certain citizens of this state the Second Amendment rights that our state and our U.S. Constitution are guaranteeing them. If Durham County or Orange County or whatever decides at some point in time that I can't carry a concealed weapon in their jurisdiction, I'm not going to take it out of my car while I'm driving through those counties and throw it in a ditch somewhere, and they don't have the right to keep me from doing that to start with. If the cities and counties don't try to illegally deny people their Second Amendment rights, there won't be any lawsuits. If they do try to, those of us who are affected by it will take them to court and should take them to court. This is just what this amendment is doing is trying to give cities and municipalities the right to overrule state law and really to undermine the U.S. Constitution. So I would ask that you defeat this amendment.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the adoption of Amendment A16 sent forth by Representative Fisher. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Representative Grady, does the gentleman wish to record on this amendment? The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 34 having voted in the affirmative and 79 in the negative, the amendment fails. The lady from Orange, Representative Insco, is recognized to send forth an amendment. The clerk will read.
Representative Insco moves to amend the bill on page 3, lines 9 through 13 by rewriting those lines to read.
The lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask Representative Schaefer a question.
Does the lady from Mecklenburg yield to the lady from Orange?
I yield.
She yields.
Representative Schaefer, I've read Section 3. It has to do with educational guns on educational property. Could you tell me specifically what you were hoping to achieve with this amendment? What needed to be changed in the law?
What we wanted to do in House Bill 937 2 years ago, when we allowed individuals with concealed handgun permits to be able to take a concealed weapon, keep it in very narrow circumstances, keep it within the closed container of their car or locked vehicle, we wanted to effectively allow them this affirmative defense. We're giving individuals this ability, this right for purposes of self-defense, yet under the law there was no ability for them to remove the weapon from that closed container in order to protect themselves. So what we wanted to do in this is to provide that affirmative defense, and we were very specific about making it an imminent threat, about protection of for self and others, from death or great bodily harm. But again, it was for a threat of imminent danger.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen of the House, I don't really disagree with that. If a person has a handgun permit, has a concealed handgun, has it in the car in a loaded container or a loaded or a locked glove compartment, and they are in imminent death, a threat of death or serious bodily harm, they ought to be able to use that. It's illegal. Legally, they have a right to use it. So I think it's inconsistent to prevent them from using it. And I think my amendment actually does exactly that. What I don't want a person with a concealed handgun locked in a car to be able to do would be to drive onto a campus or an elementary school or a high school and see a dangerous situation across campus or hear about it on the radio and be able to go into that danger or put themselves in a dangerous situation and then use the handgun. My first job was teaching at an elementary school in Berkeley, California. We had California Youth Authority students there periodically. Occasionally, one would be found to have a weapon, a handgun. I think one of the most counterproductive things would be to have had many people on that campus with guns and become aware of that. I think that would increase the opportunity for violence and for death and for injury. And so my amendment allows the person to do everything that Representative Schaefer says that she intends for it to do, and it would also narrow it so that it would take away the question of whether a person could actually become involved or move far away from the vehicle and get involved outside the district. And I would appreciate your support of my amendment.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Cumberland, Representative Lucas, rise?
Speak on the amendment, sir.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this could be a good amendment. If you look at line 7, where it authorizes a person to be able to retrieve the weapon to protect themselves, it further enumerates that they will be able to protect others, conceivably innocent, such as children who are in imminent danger, maybe unintentionally. But if you are able to protect children under this amendment, I think it's a good amendment. Perhaps we could have saved some of the carnage at some of the schools in earlier experiences. So I think line 7 makes this a good amendment, so I urge you to support it.
For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Schaefer, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Insko. And we had a chance to just chat briefly before this amendment came up, and I do appreciate that we agree on the concept of this amendment and the substantive purpose of it. I would actually ask the members to vote no on this amendment, and the reason why is that I believe that the situation that Representative Insko is attempting to solve is already in the bill. It's specific, and this is something that came up actually. This question came up in committee when it talks about that phrase imminent. That really does solve the problem that I believe that she's trying to resolve. That threat has to be imminent. That's not going to be a situation where someone hears something on the radio and then goes. That would not qualify under that definition of what it is to be an imminent threat. So I would respectfully ask for the members to vote no on the amendment. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pender, Representative Millis, rise?
To speak on the amendment.
Gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to say something different than Representative Schaefer did, and what actually has me concerned is on line 7 and 8, it is clear that a condition to be able to be lawful is that you have to remain in the vicinity of his or her vehicle. And it's my understanding if this amendment were to pass and become law, if a principal was actually present when a school shooting actually immediately occurred, and between the time that law enforcement was arrived, it's my understanding that him or her runs to their vehicle to be able to get the concealed firearm that they're lawfully possessing, that they have to remain at the vicinity of their vehicle in order to protect life. They cannot run back into the school and actually stop the violence. To me, this amendment actually would harm lives. It doesn't actually perpetrate safety. And I understand the intent of the amendment sponsor, but I think that the intention does not lead to the results of what is actually put in the language of this amendment. So to add something additional to what Representative Schaefer said, I think this amendment harms lives and the potential of something like that happening, and I would ask for you to not support this amendment.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Bishop, rise?
To ask Representative Insko a question.
Does the lady from Orange yield to the gentleman from Mecklenburg?
I yield.
She yields.
Further to Representative Millis's point, and focusing on that same clause 2 at the end of the proposed amendment, wouldn't the amendment deprive one of the affirmative defense if they remove their gun from their car under risk of or anticipation of imminent attack and fled from the assailant? So they ran away from the assailant with their gun in their possession. Wouldn't they be deprived of the affirmative defense under this language?
That's a good question. There's another part of the bill that is changed in this amendment also. It deletes Section F. And Section F is relieves the duty to retreat. And I believe that the person should have a duty to retreat. If they're in the car, they can move the car out of danger. This would not prevent a person from retreating from danger.
Follow up?
Does the lady yield to an additional question?
I yield.
She yields.
Do I understand you're saying that the language that requires as a condition of the affirmative defense that the person remain in the vicinity of his or her vehicle would not require them, would not prevent them from retreating, from fleeing?
They could flee in the car.
But they can't run away.
I think they get away a lot faster in a car.
Very well.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nash, Representative Collins, rise?
To ask the amendment sponsor a question.
Does the lady from Orange yield to the gentleman from Nash?
I yield.
She yields.
Representative Insco, if I understand this amendment correctly, let's say I'm going to pick up my granddaughter from her elementary school, and I'm in the parking lot right across the street, and I see some guy walk into the building with a rifle and a shotgun and bullet belts strapped across him, and he goes in, and I start hearing shots inside and people screaming. Are you telling me that the only way I can go in if I happen to have a concealed weapon with me is to drive my car through the front door, and then I can go in and aid the people? And that if I don't do that, I can't offer them aid?
I think the problem that I have is that you wouldn't be the only person with a concealed gun who would be in the vicinity.
The lady will suspend. For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Jeter, rise?
It's getting increasingly difficult to hear this riveting conversation back here in the back of the chamber.
Noted. Would ask the Sergeant at Arms to ask our visitors outside to please be a little more quiet. The lady from Orange has the floor to continue debating.
And Representative Collins, that is actually my intent. I believe it is very dangerous. I would not have wanted people in my junior high school running into the building with a gun. I would not have wanted 3 or 4 people running into the building with a gun. I did trust the people in my school to be able to defend us. That was their job. And I think it's very dangerous on a school campus where there are young children involved to have multiple people with guns. And I think if this bill passes, we will have multiple people around with guns. And I think that's very dangerous. I think that my intent is to say, if you have a gun in a car and you are in danger yourself, you have a right to use it. And I have no problem with that. And I think if you saw your daughter was being attacked across the car, or you could see your daughter anyway within eyesight of your car, you could certainly defend her, and or anybody else that you saw right there. But you could not leave and go into the building away from out of the vicinity of your car. You don't have to stay right by the car.
Briefly debate the amendment.
The gentleman from Nash has the floor to debate the bill.
It looks to me this is basically a matter of opinion. Some of us think that it's more dangerous to have people who have been trained to use handguns and have followed the law all their lives and have concealed permits to be in a location trying to stop a shooter from carnage. And some people think it's safer to just have a shooter who's in somewhere shooting the place up, just let him go until until the kids there are eventually fortunate enough to where somebody's in the building that can help them. So, if you agree with the first part of what I said, you need to vote no on this amendment like I'm going to. If you agree with the second part of what I said, vote for it.
Pages, the chair thanks you for your service today. Pages are excused for the day. For what purpose does the gentleman from Cumberland, Representative Glazier, rise?
To debate the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is one of those that's not an easy decision one way or the other, and I'll explain why I say that, but why I'm going to vote for the amendment, but with concern. but my concern on the amendment's less than my concern on the provision that exists in the bill. You can't look at either the bill provision or the amendment provision without knowing the self-defense law in the state as it relates to the defense of others. There are two theories on defense of others, and that's the problem. It's not the himself, herself, or the family members, as Representative Collins said, because that's clean and clear, I think. The problem is the others. We are in a minority of jurisdictions in North Carolina on our defense of others law. The majority jurisdiction says you can come to the defense of others if you know them or their family members and if you understand the circumstances in which they're in danger. And that's the majority. North Carolina, because we want to be able to come to the aid of anyone, has a more Samaritan kind of approach, and that is you can come to the aid of anyone, even if you don't know them or don't know their circumstances, as long as you know that you're taking the place they would have. So if you come to the aid of someone, for example, just a simple example. I come out of a bar or restaurant, I see a guy beating up a woman and on top and pelting her. And my chauvinistic instinct takes over despite my body, and I go attack the guy. And I take him off the woman, and the woman gets away and runs. Well, I'm in great shape if the woman had a right to defend herself. I'm in really bad shape if that was a cop on top of her. She had no right to defend herself. He was trying to keep her from escaping. Then I've committed assault on a law enforcement officer. So we're in the minority of jurisdictions where you can come to the aid of anyone, but you got to know, you sort of take the position of the person you're coming to the aid of. That's my problem in the bill. The bill says you can come to the aid of anyone based on the statute where you believe it's threatening imminent danger. What Representative Insco is trying to do is have some limitation to that and really get at allowing what Representative Collins has. I don't think it quite does that. So I agree with Representative Collins, there's some issues. But here's the problem I have with the bill. The bill sort of goes from a grounded or practical school safety approach to sort of abstract flight because it takes the general proposition that you ought to be able to come to the aid of anyone in a threatening situation out of the context in which it's happening and really out of the context of the school. And here's the problem I have at the school. We've just put in, pursuant to Representative Holloway's bill and others a couple years ago, the panic alarm system. And most schools we've given money to put in more protective glass doors, more tinted doors, all those kinds of things. So I'm someone, a maintenance worker. I hear a ruckus or I hear over the loudspeaker that someone has a gun. I don't know it, but I race to my car because I got carry concealed. I grab my gun. I believe I have information that's a threatening situation and someone on campus is in imminent danger. I don't know who, but they are. And I race into the situation. At the same time, panic alarms are being hit, and the police are being called. And when the maintenance worker, or maybe the parent who happens to be there at a PTA meeting, comes racing in with their gun, and the officers are coming in the other door, racing in with theirs, responding to the panic alarm, unfortunately, the parent or the volunteer or the maintenance worker doesn't have a T-shirt we've issued that says, I'm the good guy, don't shoot. And so we have created an enormous potential, I think, under the bill, without limitation, to really causing potential harm or death to law enforcement officers coming in who don't know all the circumstances, but they know people are waving guns, and that's not good around kids. So I don't know what the answer is. I think there's a way to do something between what Representative Schaefer's bill does and what Representative Insco's amendment does, but I am at least sure, passing over to the Senate, that I'd rather have the more restrictive version than the completely open version and work from that. I fear that what we've done in the bill is create a real practical concern at law enforcement trying to respond and not knowing who the good guy or the bad guy is when we're allowing everyone to race to their car and get their gun and come on campus. It takes it out of the context of what's happening at the school and what we put in place with those panic alarms and all the other things to get a quicker response by law enforcement, but that also means they don't get all the details till they get there. And so while Representative Collins and Representative Schaefer are right, there are circumstances when getting that gun out may save lives. There are equally circumstances, in my opinion, in which they may cost them. And I think we need to, with this bill is crossing over, I think it needs to be fixed. But I'd rather start from a position of a more restrictive position that Representative Insko saying, at least let's limit the gun for right now to the vicinity of where the real threat is to the person, because at least we know they can assess that threat. They can't really be assessing the threat across campus. Not well. And so that's my concern. I don't have a good position, except I'm going to support the amendment because I think it's better than the bill, but I think both should be amended on the Senate side. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Jeter, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
I appreciate Representative Insko's amendment, and I appreciate the intent. My concern, and Representative Glazer addressed it a little bit, is concealed carry permit holders are the most well-trained non-police officers in North Carolina. These are the best trained. If I was a concealed carry permit holder and I was at my daughter's school and I knew she was behind that glass 2 doors over, this provision says I can't go in. I'm going in because if I don't go in, I'm going to get killed when I go back home to my wife. And that's the problem I have with this provision, is I understand it in a lot of cases, but when you're talking about immediate family, and I understand Representative Glazer's point that that's not clearly defined, it is clearly defined for me. And this says I can't go in a glass door in a building to protect my child. That, to me, is a bridge too far.
Mr. Speaker.
For the best trained people we've got.
For what purpose does the lady from Orange, Representative Insko,
I'd like to ask Representative Jeter a question.
Does the gentleman from Mecklenburg yield to the lady from Orange?
Yes, sir.
He is.
Representative Jeter, you stated that concealed carry permitters are some of the most well-trained people. Could you be more specific about how many hours of training they have to have and what kind of training they have to have?
I cannot. I know that concealed carry training is a lengthy course with educational requirements. I will say this: I don't think anyone disputes that having a concealed carry license is better than not having any.
Second question.
Does the gentleman yield to an additional question?
Sure. This seems like it's going to work out well.
So, would you be surprised to learn that they receive 4 hours of class training and 4 hours of range training?
No, I would be encouraged.
Another question.
Does the gentleman yield to an additional question?
Sure.
He yields.
So, Representative Jeter, you believe that somebody who's had 4 hours of class training I grew up with guns in my house. I have a brother who is a gunsmith and a gun owner and a gun shop owner. And I have a son who's a law enforcement officer. And you're saying that 4 hours of in-class training in a book and then 4 hours on the range would let a person go into a school and use a gun and be considered highly well-trained?
I am saying that someone who's got any level of training and their daughter or their son is behind that glass door, they should have the option to go in there and save them.
And I'd like to ask one more question.
Does the gentleman yield to an additional question from the lady
Sure,
from Orange?
it's gone so well so far.
He yields.
And if there were 20 other parents who had children in that and 2 or 3 of them had guns too, would that make you safer or your daughter safer?
I cannot answer that hypothetical question. I can only tell you what I would do as an individual.
For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Compton, rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To speak on the amendment.
The lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'm really struggling with this amendment. I struggle with this bill, but I really, with some of the points that have been brought up by Representative Glazer and Representative Millis, I really do struggle with this amendment, and I'm thinking of some personal experiences as an administrator at 2 of the largest high schools in North Carolina. And I heard what Representative Jeter just said, that he wants someone to go in behind the glass door. Well, I understand that, but I'm thinking, as a principal, when I know of an active situation in my school, and this is policy in CMS, Union County, everywhere, I immediately put that school into lockdown. Immediate. And people are trained on it, teachers are trained on it, the community is aware, and once we go into lockdown, it is our job and responsibility that you aren't coming anywhere. So I struggle with that part of this whole conversation, that someone's going to leave the building, especially if you're on a really large campus like where I was, go to their car, because once I've put the school on lockdown, it's policy and it's safety, you're not coming back in. I mean, we don't want anyone to come back in, right? I mean, that's why we are on lockdown. There's no movement, nothing is supposed to happen. But then this amendment also talks about staying in the vicinity of your vehicle, which I completely understand and agree with what Representative Millis said. But I'm thinking again about the other high school where I worked, and it was our homecoming. It was a Friday night. And it was Friday night football. And we're at the football stadium, and the parking lot is full of cars and people. And we were losing the game, of course. But then something happened. We had a shooting at school, at our homecoming game. And we had a gang, because this is gang activity that occurred, and that part hasn't been brought up in this. They left the stadium, and where'd they go? Parking lot, where all those vehicles are. And we couldn't find them. And we were all looking for them. And so I'm just thinking from that perspective, if fans, parents like Representative Jeter, if they're leaving the stadium and they're in their car, would they be protected by this amendment to protect themselves around their vehicle? It's nighttime. We don't know who they are. It's already an active crime scene. So I just think that I understand the intent of what no, I really don't. I think I understand a little bit of what you're trying to do, but I think our schools are more complicated, and especially when we have very large, big high schools where we have events going on, saying near your vehicle or not understanding lockdown and how that works, or a gun coming back on campus. I've been in a situation where a child also at another school left class because he was being bullied. He went to his car, and he came back on campus, walking in with a gun. You know, I don't understand why we're even talking about having guns on school. I can't understand that at all, but that's where we are today. I do think this amendment needs some more work, and I'm struggling to support it, and I'm struggling not to support it. So I am very conflicted, but I would ask you and those who gave you this idea to really think about how that's going to be impacted based on real situations that could happen anywhere in North Carolina.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the lady from Orange, Representative Ensko, rise?
I'd like to just make a brief comment, and then I'd like to withdraw my amendment. I agree that some issues have been raised.
Ladies recognized to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things I didn't mention that I think is this section really does need some serious thought and some serious amendment, serious work on an amendment. I believe with the language as it is currently written, you could actually have two young people on a school fighting, one clearly small, one clearly big, one clearly losing, one clearly in danger of being harmed, and that this would allow a person to actually use a gun and have an affirmative defense against being charged with anything. That we can't let that happen. It's also true that the great majority of educators, the great majority of parents in schools, the great majority of administrators are opposed to having guns in school at all. So I hope that as we move forward with the bill, whether it's this side or the Senate side, that we will work together to fix this section of the bill. It is very important for our schools to remain safe and for our schools to be a safe place without guns. I appreciate your support, and Mr. Speaker, I withdraw the amendment.
The amendment will be returned to the lady. The gentleman from Buncombe, Representative Turner, is recognized to send forth an amendment. The clerk will read.
Representative Turner moves to amend the bill on page 8, lines 42 through 43 by inserting the following between
the gentleman
lines.
has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment doesn't really change anything in the current bill. This is an addition. Yesterday we had, and today, a lot of lively debate about the permit process, and yesterday I brought up concerns about the importance of that permit as it pertains to private sales, and that's the only way when you're engaging in a private sale, you know that someone's eligible to buy a firearm. We then talked about some of the shortcomings of the permit process, and we talked about the fact that they were valid for 5 years and things like that. And so what this amendment would do is direct the Department of Public Safety with the Office of IT and the FBI to study and look at making a NICS or CJ Leads type of process available to the general public. This way, when I'm in the Home Depot parking lot trying to conduct a sale and someone hands me a permit that's 4 years old, I have a way to verify that they are still eligible to buy that handgun. I thank you for your consideration of this amendment, and I ask you to please support it.
For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Schaefer, rise?
To debate the amendment.
Lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Turner, for bringing forth this amendment. We had a chance to talk earlier today about this amendment, and I think it's a great amendment. I think that it addresses some good things and things that we have been conceptually trying to address in the bill as a whole. So I would ask the members to support the amendment and give us the opportunity to look at this option for moving forward. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Catawba, Representative Adams, rise?
To debate the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the amendment.
Well, this is an amendment that's just popped up, and I haven't really had time to study this, but I fear that this might be a backdoor means of registering firearms. This is not what CJ Leads was entirely designed for. NICS was designed for this purpose. It is a database of criminal behavior. I have a problem with making a decision on this, and I will oppose the amendment.
For what purpose does the lady from Surrey, Representative Stevens, rise?
To speak on the amendment.
The lady has the floor to debate the amendment.
I think my opposition to the amendment comes from a very different place, and that is any of us who've been here as long as I have, and that's only 6 years, CJ Leads has had a horrible time getting up and getting started and is so overburdened that we can't add something like this to it. You can't develop those systems overnight, and it would really basically take almost a new system. So I would oppose the amendment for that reason.
Representative Turner is recognized for second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the comments from Representative Adams and Representative Stevens. This is to put forth a study. This is to study the process, and it's looking at CJ Lead and NICS as in that study. It does not mean that CJ Leads needs to be used. It does not mean that NICS needs to be used. It means that we're going to do a study to look at a way to give the public access to a system like that, or it even says, or another similar system. So it doesn't have to be NICS or CJ Leads, but it's a system that would provide private sellers the ability to run those background checks and be sure that the people that they're trying to sell firearms to are eligible to buy those firearms. And again, this is a study.
Representative Pittman is recognized to debate the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I have stated on the floor previously in other debate, when my son made that purchase from a friend of mine, we used the existing NICS background system, check system, and it was fine. I don't think this is necessary because that's already available. And plus, I do have some fear that if we go to this, it might lead to registration of firearms, which does not need to happen because registration is a prelude to confiscation, which has proven itself in Nazi Germany and other places as well. We don't need to have that happen. And so I don't see why we even need to study that. I think we should learn from history. Thank you.
Representative Floyd is recognized to debate the amendment. Representative Adams is recognized to debate the amendment.
To debate the amendment a second time. Looking at this, what is proposed here is a study for the development of a system to allow a background check to be conducted in private transfers of firearms. Okay? We have that system. It's the NICS system. We voted not to do that. We voted to use the purchase permit system. Why are we backtracking? If we want to re-debate this and go to a proposal of using the NICS system for private transfers, I'd entertain that. Why are we going around in circles, I guess?
Representative Hardister is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't know if this is necessary, but I just realized there's a typo on line 6. The word "the" is listed twice or written twice before the word "seller." Just thought I'd point it out.
Representative Schaefer is recognized, and the clerk will be looking at that.
Thank you. To debate the amendment a second time.
You're recognized to debate the amendment a second
time. Thank you. I simply wanted to mention that the language is permissive in the study. I mean, it is a study. It is something that, again, conceptually we are trying to look at. One of the sticking points for individuals with the pistol permit system is if we do away with it, what are we going to do about private transfers? And the idea is this might be an opportunity to allow that, to allow individuals to access the language of the study language does not say, to develop a system to require individuals to use this kind of a system. It's simply to investigate, and there would be reported findings at the end of it. I would encourage members to support it. I think that especially those who would advocate repealing the pistol permit requirement, this is a positive step in that direction. And frankly, when we've stripped a lot of that from the bill, this is one effort where we can move forward in terms of looking at what do we do in that case. So I would urge members to support it. It's not calling for a requirement. It's permissive. So I would ask you to vote yes on the amendment.
The clerk has corrected the typographical error. Representative Baumgartner is recognized to debate the amendment.
I don't have it on my screen right now, and I'd like to see it while I'm discussing it.
It'll be posted shortly.
Okay. I'll try and get by here. This is a study of implementing two different systems to allow people to do a background check on someone they're selling a weapon to, and the first thing we'll do is allow it, and pretty soon thereafter we'll require it and mandate it. That's what happens a lot of times. It happened years ago on seat belts when we started allowing people to wear seat belts and then requesting it and then demanding it. And it's happened on a lot of other things, and I don't want to go down this road, and I have it now. Thank you.
Okay.
So I oppose this amendment. I don't want to. There's a lot of things here I don't want to do, including this. Thank you.
Further discussion or debate? Representative Lewis.
Inquiry to the chair.
State your inquiry.
Mr. Speaker, my computer went out too. Was the stutter that was found on the amendment corrected?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Arp is recognized. Not per talk.
Ask the amendment sponsor a question.
Representative Turner, do you yield for a question?
I yield.
He does.
In the amendment, it's and I'm trying to understand this. It's the Department of Public Safety, the Information Technology, and then the FBI. The question is, can we mandate that they participate in there? How does that work out practically? Because the NICS is obviously from there, but
Have you gotten agreement that they're going to do that, or?
I have not gotten an agreement that the FBI would do that. I would defer to staff as to how we can compel them to be a participant. But I would imagine that there's probably some sort of reciprocal agreement the state has with the FBI and NICS in order for that process to even work here.
Follow up.
Do you yield? Representative Turner, yield to a follow-up question?
Yes.
He does. He yields.
I was inclined to support, but I think the ability of this thing to work would be to include them in there, and I'm concerned that we pass this and they would not participate. So I'm kind of concerned about that.
Mr. Speaker.
What purpose, Representative Ford? Yield.
The noise is getting louder outside. It's getting tough to hear.
That is noted. If the Sergeant at Arms would inquire and report back to the chair, and if necessary, contact the Capitol Police.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Bluss, for what purpose do you rise?
Could you quiet things down in here so I could hear this singing?
Representative Turner, are you finished?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. After having a chance to confer with staff in response to Representative Arp's concern, the amendment directs DPS to consult with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It does not mandate or require that they participate.
Further discussion or debate? If not, the question before the House is the Turner Amendment, Amendment 18. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Representative Hall, the clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. The ayes are 68, the noes are 46. The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Representative Glazier is recognized for a motion. The clerk will read.
Representative Glazier moves to amend the bill on page 8, lines 42 through 43 by inserting between those lines the following.
You're recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, members. And I hope this may end with what may be one of the more least controversial amendments. This is meant to be actually a technical fix. If you look at the pistol permit statute, we don't have in it the language that we're now adding in Section 7 of the bill to the carry conceal, which is that if you're in violation of 922G and due to a domestic violence conviction, that you are not able to or disenfranchised from getting the permit. This is exactly the language that we're adding in Section 7 of the bill as to carry conceal, because we didn't have it in there. So I've taken exactly the language to fix the same provision on pistol permit. It's not meant to do anything else. I hope there's no opposition, and if there does something other than that, it can be dealt with on the Senate side. But it is strictly meant to fill a gap and to make sure that we're complying with federal law. Thank you.
Representative Lewis is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the gentleman from Cumberland's amendment is one that we've tried to come to grips with and understand thoroughly and have not been able to do so. May I be recognized for a motion?
You're recognized for a motion.
I move that Amendment 19 do lie upon the table.
There is a second, Representative Burr. The question before the House is the motion of Representative Lewis that the Glazier amendment do lie upon the table. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote.
Chief told me to tell you they're making an arrest.
Okay. The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. The ayes are 68. The noes are 44. The motion to lay it upon the table is agreed to. The Sergeant at Arms has reported, and you may want to know that arrests are being made as we speak. We're ready for third reading.
Further discussion, further debate on the bill as amended. For what purpose does the lady from Guilford, Representative Harrison, rise?
To briefly debate the bill.
The lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'm sorry my amendment was ruled out of order. I was hoping that when we had gun-related legislation in here, it would be about promoting protection against gun violence, to promote gun safety. I think that would have been the appropriate response to Sandy Hook, to Tucson, to Aurora, to Fort Hood. I was dismayed with last session's bill, but this continues to expand guns and puts guns in more violent criminals' hands. I think this is a most inappropriate response to recent situations. I don't think it's good for public safety. I don't think it's good for North Carolinians, and I'm very grateful to this chamber for making many of the improvements that we made. Protecting pistol permitting was key, and protecting the doctor's ability to communicate with their patients was important, and the domestic violence changes were very, very important, and I think those were great changes. But the fact remains that this bill does still allow more guns in more places and puts them in the hands of folks who should not have guns. So I would urge you to vote no. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Durham, Representative Hall, rise?
Speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to all the representatives and all the members who took the time to engage in the discussion and work on this bill. I continue to maintain that we should make North Carolina and all of our facilities safe for all of us to use and exercise fully. We continue to go down the path of thinking we can make an individual safe and avoid our responsibility to make our schools safe and our public spaces safe. And so we continue this idea, as I've heard discussed this evening, that somebody will be the superstar and go to their car and get a gun and come back and save all of us. Now, this supposed superstar we're talking about is somebody who has not maintained their skill level, probably never achieved that skill level, has not continued to be involved in some type of combat firing or pistol course so they could react under the stress and pressure of a live shooter situation, somebody who would come back and get in the way of properly trained law enforcement people. And so this bill seems to head down that road, and I would hope that as this bill moves and we do other legislation, we keep in mind that we're creating a false construct. I don't know if anybody in here has been engaged in an active combat pistol course or weapons course in the last 4 or 5 months. And if you had not qualified, and I would not want to have to rely on you to save my life, I would hope that we would make the whole building safe so all of us could be safe. And I think we owe the same thing to the citizens of North Carolina. We shouldn't create a false hope. We should not create areas that aren't safe and say, let's just have individuals think that they're going to be safe. So as you vote on this, I would hope that you would reject this idea of just an individual being safe, and let's work toward keeping and making our public spaces safe and making our communities safe, not just select individuals in our communities.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Guilford, Representative Blust, rise?
Speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members of the House. I know this is third reading. Minds are made up. But I just am always uncomfortable sitting here and hearing certain assertions made and having them go unresponded to at all, even when we know the outcome of the vote. And I would just say this to Representative Hall. There have been numerous instances. Now, they are almost blacked out in the national media. Very little coverage, but there's numerous instances where this very thing has happened. Someone with a gun has stopped a much larger crime in its tracks from occurring. One was in Texas just a few weeks, if not even closer to Sandy Hook, where someone with a gun stopped a bigger massacre. And the rationale here is simple. It's very simple to grasp. The law here we're passing is only going to apply to our law-abiding citizens. The bad guys, the criminals, are going to have the guns. We are safer. It can be documented. It can be proven. People are safer when more good people have guns, And the bad guys know they've got to be careful. Almost every big shootout has occurred in a gun-free zone, so some might think they're safer and they might get cold feelings of joy because, oh, those awful guns, we've kept them out of people's hands. But the bad guys have them, and that's when we run into problems. This bill is a simple step towards having more law-abiding people able to exercise their Second Amendment rights to protect themselves and their loved ones and other people in the community. And I commend it to you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Union, Representative Arprice?
Speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a very, very thorough, very thoughtful debate on this whole bill with amendments. Some went the opposite way that I wanted it to go. But the rhetoric is terrible, really. It was been alleged that this bill will put more guns in the hand of violent criminals. I see nothing in the bill that does that. It talks about those who want to have weapons, who choose to do that and exercise their Second Amendment right through the lawful process here in North Carolina to have a concealed carry permit to protect their family. Let me tell you, as a father who has 2 children that I absolutely love, if I come across the evil that has shot and killed innocent children, and I knew that my children were in there, hell could not stop me from trying to get to them and protect them. I think the rhetoric about this has got to go down. What we're talking about are law-abiding citizens and their right to use their Second Amendment right to protect themselves and their families. And that's what this bill does.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Wake, Representative Pendleton, rise?
To speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
I have asked hundreds of law officers through the years, do you favor citizens having concealed weapons permits? And the answer is yes, and usually it's yes, and I only wish more people had them. We need the backup. We can't be everywhere. Now let's talk about the school situation. A few years ago in Mississippi, there was a man that went into an elementary school and started killing people. The assistant principal ran outside his vehicle, got his gun. Now, he was unlawful because he had a gun on school property. Mississippi now has some sense, and they now allow him to keep it in a locked vehicle. He goes back into school and kills the guy. He saved a bunch of lives. I just don't understand where some of you people's thoughts are going to. I don't understand it. In Wake County, and one more story and I'll shut up. In Wake County, we opted out of the state plan and we allowed citizens and employees of the county to carry guns on county property. For 4 years, till somebody else took over and then they repealed it, but for 4 years, citizens could come on our property, the staff could carry guns. In our parks, a huge county, how many gun infractions do we have because they were law-abiding citizens with concealed weapons permits? In 4 years, how many do we have? None. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Forsyth, Representative Terry, rise?
To speak about the bill, sir.
The lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I have respect for everyone who has worked tirelessly to create this bill. So I will be as brief as I possibly can. There is one area that I have not heard very much being spoken about, and that is what I wish to speak to at this moment. I recognize the need for gun laws. There's no question about that. However, These laws must be done with due diligence, citizen protection, fiscal responsibility, and common sense. Gun violence is expensive for all of us. Currently, the cost to America in the aggregate is estimated from my research at $229 billion. North Carolina's numbers are not yet available. There was a study done some 16 years ago at Duke University by a Dr. Cook and a colleague at Georgetown University, where they discovered then that it was at $2.6 billion. But since that time, it has gone up to $229 billion. The ripple effect of this cost is the devil that is in its details. Medevac, emergency room costs, mental health, Medicare and Medicaid, private insurance, rehabilitation costs, victims assistance, if they survive. The list really goes on and on. No one really knows the true cost of gun violence in America. But there have been studies done to calculate the cost of gunshot wounds in relationship to their driving up taxpayer and government costs. The numbers are staggering and should give those who say they care about the burden of taxes on the citizenry some reason to pause and look at the issue before consciously, then as we are doing here in this chamber. I, for one, cannot support this unfunded mandate to the taxpayers of North Carolina until we take a more comprehensive approach to the cost that it is on the public. It is reckless. It is thoughtless. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Durham, Representative Michelle, rise?
To speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'm getting a little tired of, well, let me back up. I'm one of you people. I'm one of you people, and I'm getting tired of being imbued with things that just not true about us people. I've sat here for these last 3 months or 4 months hearing all types of descriptions given to you people and us people. I carry in my pocket and always have 2 documents. The first one is the Constitution of the State of North Carolina, and the second one is the Constitution of the United States, which, by the way, still calls me 3/5 of a person, but we won't talk about that right now. I also stand before you to let you know that the laws that are on the books right now concerning gun control, concerning a lot of things that you see before many of you got here, were put there by me. I was the one who was the target of the NRA, who found an old campaign poster of mine that had my picture on it, drew a target on it, and used it for target practice. Now that's my feeling in terms of, I was the one that got the Brady amendments put in on the books in this state. Now I have sat here for 2 years now and watched many of the things that I did that had my name on them go down the tubes. Now what we are doing is we are retrogressing. What you're doing is, instead of leaving things up to those people who have the authority, who have the know-how, who have the experience to do things, you want to put it in my pocket to do it. I don't know how many of you would want to see me carrying a concealed weapon. I sure don't want to carry it because I wouldn't know what to do with it if something happened. Now, you talk about following the Constitution. The United States Constitution says no law shall be made to infringe upon the rights of people to bear arms in terms of militia. The North Carolina Constitution says the same thing, but it goes one step further. You talk about the Constitution. Let me just call to your attention that one step further. It talks about the militia and the right to bear arms and not infringe. But the last portion says this: nothing herein shall justify the practice of carrying concealed weapons or the or prevent the General Assembly from enacting penal statutes against such practice. That's your state constitution. There's a difference in what the federal constitution says about weapons that doesn't go as far as the state constitution. You've been sitting up here arguing about this thing, what I consider unconstitutional. So you're going to pass it because you got the numbers to do it. You got the numbers to do anything you want to do. Whether it's right or wrong, you got the numbers to do it. You're going to pass this, but I'm telling you, it's leading you down a slippery slope.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Catawba, Representative Adams, rise?
To debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
You know, I've listened to this dysphomistic language from the other side, the opponents of this, and it leads me to believe that there's a very strong prejudice towards all gun owners. I've been a gun owner for over 50 years. I know probably more than 1,000 people that are members of the gun culture. They're wonderful people. They are salt of the earth people. They are ministers. They are teachers. They are law enforcement people. They are soldiers. They are veterans. And it is deeply offensive to me that you folks characterize all gun owners as criminals somehow in your minds.
Speaker, Representative Adams, if the gentleman would suspend, members, pursuant to House rules, references that could be interpreted as referring to individual personalities are not in order. The chair would remind the members to please contain their debate to the issue at hand, which is the third reading of the House Committee Substitute for House Bill 562. The gentleman from Catawba may continue.
I stand in favor of this bill because this bill provides for gun owners to be protected. We talk about concealed carry. We've been through a number of issues, and we have worked out some conflicting issues to my satisfaction. We have made progress in improving the pistol permit system, and I'll work together to continue that. I think that the debate about concealed carry was misplaced. Concealed carry has been shown to reduce crime and is probably one of the main contributors to reducing violent crime in the last 20 years. I support this bill, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
For what purpose does the lady from Orange, Representative Insco, arise?
To debate the bill.
The lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, I'm on the DHHS Appropriations Subcommittee, and I really like some of the work we've done this year. The staff, the Republican leadership had the Pew Foundation come in and talk about evidence-based programs. And that's getting more and more popular now, that we will fund programs that work, and that makes a lot of sense to put taxpayer dollars where programs work. And we're beginning to do that in Health and Human Services. We have evidence about guns. There's a lot of research that's done on guns and gun safety. The Johns Hopkins University has a Center for Gun Policy. They publish a lot of research on guns. We know that more guns equals more violence. We know that more guns in public spaces equal more deaths. It's not we don't have to leave it up to anecdotal information about an incident we heard here where someone saved a life because they had a gun. We know that there are anecdotal informations on both sides. You can come up with stories about people with guns saving lives, and you can find plenty of stories about people with guns who created violence and mayhem. It's in the news every day. Connecticut, for example, there was a drop in homicides when they increased their gun laws, did more background checks. There was a significant drop. In Missouri, when they repealed the background checks, there was a spike in gun homicides. So, and the issue of gun safety is more of an issue than whether we have guns or not. Background checks make a lot of sense. Stronger laws result in less gun violence. Stronger laws result in less trafficking, less bad guys having guns. We've got to get to the place where we can talk across the aisle about this. I said already, I grew up in a farming family, so I grew up in a gun family. And I have had, in my adult life, family members with guns so it's not true that there's nobody on this side of the aisle that comes from a gun culture. But we also believe in smart gun laws. And that's our duty as state legislators, is to take steps to protect our public. The evidence is here, if we will look at it. Vote no on the bill.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nash, Representative Collins, arise?
Briefly debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
You know, I'm a lot like my seatmate. I guess that's why we've gotten along so well, and he continues to allow me to sit with him after 5 years. But he uses a phrase which I like to use too. I'm data-driven. I hear a lot of claims being made. I hear a lot of adjectives being thrown around, but I haven't heard any hard data. So let me give you some. The 31 states that have shall issue laws concerning private citizens to carry concealed weapons have on average a 24% lower violent crime rate, a 19% lower murder rate, and a 39% lower robbery rate than states that forbid concealed weapons. In fact, the 9 states with the lowest violent crime rates are all right to carry states. Remarkably, guns are used for self-defense more than 2 million times a year, 3 to 5 times the estimated number of violent crimes committed with guns. We all know that cities with the strictest gun control laws like Chicago and Washington, D.C. are some of the most dangerous places to live in the United States. So if you really want to see gun violence go down, if you really want to see our expenses through all the programs that one of our representatives talked about go down, then please vote for this bill.
For what purpose does the lady from Wake, Representative Holly, arise?
Speak on the bill.
The lady has the floor to debate the bill.
I've been sitting here for 2 days, up and down. I've written pages. I've been angry. I've been sad. Right now, I'm just afraid. And my fear is based upon my community and the use of guns. You ask why? I'll tell you why. The existing reality of my people, and I'm going to get specific, and particularly the African American male, they're being killed for standing on the corner doing nothing. Doing nothing. Selling a cigarette by police officers. And all of this is with the assumption that he or she may be in possession of a weapon. A lot of times. You know, and many times that you've seen in the news lately, there has never been a weapon found. And these have been innocent people who, by the police, who've been trained in how to diffuse certain situations and with discernment, and these incidents are happening.
Mr. Speaker.
My fear is...
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman may state his point of order.
Is the lady's comments, are they in order for the bill? It seems she's debating something that has nothing to do with the legislation before us.
The chair thanks the gentleman. The chair would ask the lady from Wake to confine her remarks to the extent possible to the House Committee Substitute Number 3 for House Bill 562, the material printed therein as amended. The lady has the floor to continue her debate.
Okay. What I'm talking about is the right for somebody to have a gun. I have no problem with that. But I have a problem with the right of somebody to use a gun in a situation where they are not equipped to do. And this bill allows that. This bill allows somebody to shoot first and ask questions later, and all they have to do is say, I feel threatened. And that's where I have a problem, because my community are the ones who are being killed. That's why I cannot support this gun bill.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Sampson, Representative Bell, arise?
To debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
I don't know whether what I have to say is going to be germane to the bill that much or whatever, but I would like to have something to say. I am, what you might say, saturated, or super saturated. You know, when you sit down so long and listen to all of this, it just, you get overwhelmed. And I was talking to my seatmate, and I told him it reminded me of the song that Tina Turner says, you know, what does love have to do with it? And sometimes I wonder, when I look at this bill, you know, what has gun safety got to do with it? Because I think it's all about some other things. As I have looked at some research too, and I think that I don't see how we can sit here and go with this bill without doing more to it whenever we, in North Carolina, we have so many murders with guns. It says between 2001 and 10, there were more than twice as many people were killed with guns in North Carolina than killed in combat in Iraq and Afghanistan. So we need, seem to me like, I don't think concealed carry would answer that, would solve that problem. But then as I go on down there, when I'm talking about what does love have to do with it, I see where it said, and it's hard for me to see all of this, where the NRA has collectively donated $195,200 to federal candidates from North Carolina. So I'm saying that more than gun safety has to do with it, I think that has a lot to do with it. And then I sat here and I listened to people talk about the Bible. And they have admonished us not to vote for certain things because we probably would be confronted with it when we got to the pearly gates or something. But I read the Bible too. And 1 Timothy, the 10th chapter, 6 and the 6th and 9th verse says something about, for the love of money is the root of all evil. And sometimes I'm just telling you that I think maybe instead of thinking about all of the gun safety and everything, just follow the money and you might see why we're here debating all of this stuff. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Rockingham, Representative Jones, arise?
To debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I've been relatively quiet over the last 2 days while we've spent quite a bit of time. I've been listening to quite a bit of rhetoric that has to do with Second Amendment rights in general, with gun ownership. And I've come to the conclusion that with this bill, just like other bills we've had in the past, and no doubt others will have in the future that has to do with this general issue, it really comes down to how you feel about this question. Either you think that having law-abiding citizens have more access to gun ownership is a good thing or it's a bad thing. That's how you're basically going to make your decision when you come down to this. And some people seem to have the idea that the way to reduce violence is to keep guns away from law-abiding citizens. I think that's a misguided idea. It to me, is worse than saying that the way to fight obesity is to get rid of the forks. The forks are not the problem. Ladies and gentlemen, violence is a problem. It's an evil that lies within the hearts of mankind. It's not because of guns. I would strongly encourage you to go back and study your world history before guns were ever invented. And I would suggest that you would find that some of the greatest atrocities, some of the greatest acts of violence in human history occurred long before guns were ever invented. Now, the fact of the matter is that we have gun technology today, whether you like it or not. And the fact of the matter is that those who are determined to break the law and to commit violence using guns are going to find their way to use them. The question is, are we going to make it more or less difficult for law-abiding citizens to defend themselves? And make no mistake about it, guns are far more likely to be used in the prevention of a crime than they are to commit a crime. And I would suggest to you that you are going to be very quick when a crime is being committed against you or your loved ones. You're going to be on the phone, calling 911, doing whatever you can to try to find a good person with a gun to come to your aid. Now, we've heard a lot of rhetoric about, I would suggest that those children and those teachers that were victims at places like Columbine High School or Virginia Tech or any others that you might suggest would have been more than happy, would have been thrilled, would have been praying for law-abiding citizens to be in their vicinity with guns that could have protected them had they been allowed to do so. I've got a page full of statistics that I'm not going to cite. Representative Collins and others have cited some of those statistics, but it is very clear, time and time and time again, in different states, how homicide rates, violent crime rates have gone down dramatically whenever concealed carry laws were expanded, whenever law-abiding citizens were allowed greater access to guns. I could say a lot more. I know the hour is late and I'm not going to. But I just hope that going forward, as all this rhetoric continues, that maybe some of those things people might stop and think about. I hope that you will vote for this bill.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mecklenburg, Representative Moore, arise?
Mr. Chairman, to debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you. Like Representative Hawley and others, I have sat here for the last 2 days, and I've heard different things said. And we hear about rhetoric. Well, this is all that this bill is based upon, is rhetoric. Now, I've heard some references by my colleagues on the other side, and I have no ill will toward any of you who support this bill or who oppose it. But I've heard things like, well, this is a Jim Crow era law that we need to eradicate, which is hypocritical because you reinstitute Jim Crow era laws like blocking people with the right to vote. And I'm going to
Representative Moore. The gentleman will contain his remarks.
I will.
House Committee substitute for House Bill 562.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
The gentleman may continue.
Thank you, sir. Listen, this bill is a part of an ongoing legislation that we have seen since we've come into this chamber some 3 years ago. We started with, and excuse me if my rocks might be out of order, sir. We started with stand your ground laws. We started with the amendment of the Castle Doctrine. And now we come to eradicating pistol permits. We fixed some of that, and I applaud some of my colleagues on the other side for fixing some of the things that were most atrocious, like having our members, our interns coming onto the floor with concealed carries. That was the most insane provision that I saw in this whole bill. And you can believe or whatever you want to. And let me just say this. My family comes from a gun culture. We've had guns in my family for years. And yes, I own a gun, couple of guns as well. But I sure wouldn't feel that much safer to have 30 of my friends on the floor packing heat when we get hot in here about debates like the ones we've had for the last 2 or 3 days. So I understand that the hour is late, but Mr. Speaker, I was just compelled to stand up and say something because I just couldn't sit down without making my particular statement. This is a much improved bill, but this is still a bad, unnecessary, insane bill. And I, for one, sir, will unequivocally be voting no, and I give back my time. Thank you, sir.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Cumberland, Representative Glazier, arise?
Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to be very brief and just make a couple of comments. Number one, I commend the bipartisan work that was done in the last few days on policy decisions that are now incorporated in the bill. I think smart choices were made on the whole, and that is helpful. But they were, in the end, policy choices. And so I stand as my first point to make it clear Second Amendment was really never much involved in this bill. Like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. And the Court has made clear in an opinion by Justice Scalia, and I read the following language because I think it highlights the point. In her opinion, that recognized the Second Amendment right for citizens to have arms for self-defense in their home. Justice Scalia says the following: nothing in our opinion should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions or qualifications on the sale of arms. Effectively, that's really all this bill dealt with. So it wasn't about the Second Amendment. There is no Second Amendment right to carry concealed. There is no Second Amendment right to have guns in schools and public buildings. There is no Second Amendment right to not have a permitting process or a licensing process. They are, in the end, policy choices left to us. And there are good arguments and bad arguments both ways, and we have argued about, I think for the most part, civilly about those. But we shouldn't confuse the Constitution with policy choices, number one. And my reason for voting against this bill, despite the changes to it, come down to a policy choice and a philosophical one, for me, that differs from some of my friends and colleagues in the majority. And that is that I think local citizens have the right to deprive themselves of the freedom they may otherwise want to carry concealed in public places or non-home private places, or to regulate in different ways who and where we possess weapons and how we use them, including on school grounds or otherwise. And that, in the end, they have the right to do that if they view it as necessary to eliminate in their communities pervasive gang violence or intimidation or issues in their communities. And that they have the right to determine, communities have the right to determine, just as the statistics point out, in some communities, having access to guns may have been a community way of approaching their problems. But in others, it may not be. And so communities have the right to determine that the elimination of one set of freedom is worth the deprivation of the other. My problem is, I think, that we have no business in Raleigh second-guessing either the degree of necessity or the fairness of the trade that local communities make, and we seem to be inclined to do all of that. For those reasons, I'll be voting no. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Cumberland, Representative Lucas, arise?
To speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, I come from a perspective that may not be consistent with what I've heard about sides. I don't know which is the other side. I submit to you that the bill before us, I suspect, has positive intentions as it relates to concealed carry. I have no problem with concealed carry. The next premise is that I have no problem with increasing safety. In fact, I think every member in this House would like to see improved safety, not only in the General Assembly, in school grounds, public occasions, wherever we are. I think we ought to espouse safety. We can never be too safe. I am a gun owner. I own several guns. And I guess that makes me different from some of the statements that I've heard about the other side, whichever side that is. Please know that to me, discretion needs to be the better part of valor. I have the right to have a concealed carry, but using the scenario that I've heard described many times, I don't know how wise I'm going to be if I approach a school ground or any other public activity where something has gone wrong, obviously gone wrong. It could be even a neighborhood that's gone wrong, and gun violence appears to be the order of the day, even if it involves my family members. Were I to go and extract a concealed carry weapon from my vehicle, being the person that I am, and run into a crowd with that gun, I'm asking law enforcement to shoot me because they don't know who I am. I don't think that creates safe conditions. And I know that minds are made up, but it doesn't matter. When a life is lost, it's gone forever. We need to protect lives as best we can. And I'm hoping that we can work with those folk like Representative McNeil, Representative Faircloth, who have great experience in crowd control and how to dispense bad situations, that we will rely upon them more than we will ourselves when it comes to defusing these situations. Again, I'm not going to run in there because I know I'm going to get shot, because I'm not using good discretion. Location. You've heard that in real estate. But it also ought to apply when it comes to this particular bill. Defending your home is a location that I think that you ought to use every means necessary to protect your family. But gun safety ought to take a back seat when it comes to the public. Again, I don't know how I'm going to vote, but I want you to think. Are you exacerbating the problem? Are you proliferating the problem? Or are you solving the problem? You may have a greater problem than you anticipate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the lady from Mecklenburg, Representative Cunningham, arise?
To speak on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you. On February the 10th, 2015, concealed handgun carrier killed 3 people here, the 3 Muslims that was killed here. On February the 6th, concealed handgun permit holder, I won't call his name, killed 2 people and he committed suicide. What I would say about the gun bill, I'm not against guns, but my concern is if it's the right person that has the right consciousness to carry the gun and do what is right with it. 1 out of 4 individuals in North Carolina, 1 out of 4 in this chamber, has some type of mental illness that has been undiagnosed. I am not against guns. Like I said, I have taken care of people who have shot themselves. I have taken care of people who have been shot by other people and survived. And it's not a pretty sight. But I believe this conversation is bigger than about just guns. I believe it's way bigger than that. Our rights are not any more advantageous than the public's rights. And I think, like I said, it's a bigger conversation. Are we doing all we need to do to protect the public? Thank you. Those are my comments.
For what purpose does the lady from New Hanover, Representative Hamilton, arise?
To debate the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The lady has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you very much. I'll be brief. I just want to say that I believe that this bill and this legislation has brought out the worst in all of us. In the 5 years that I've been here, I've not heard the kind of rhetoric predominantly coming from the other side of the aisle, because Democrats this time have remained relatively silent while we listen to an internal debate going on within the GOP caucus. But having said that, I'm going to quote just one number, or maybe 2, to you that I think are relevant and will challenge some of what you've heard from the other side. In 2012, out of 8,342 criminal homicides, only 259 of them were considered justifiable. That means that gun owners are 32 times more likely to kill someone without cause than to act in self-defense. I think that's a number that we should all listen to.
Mr. Speaker.
And all remember.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Nash, Representative Collins, rise?
Would the representative yield to a question?
I will not.
Does the lady yield to a question?
I do not, Mr.
The lady from New Hanover does not yield. The lady has the floor to continue debate.
I will close by saying that this bill has done nothing to move our economy forward in North Carolina. It hasn't recruited or created one job. What it's done is created a division within this body and upset a lot of people. There were a lot of people here this week, mostly mothers, teachers, and others, that are very much opposed to this. Just keep that in mind, everybody. 32 times more likely to kill someone without cause than to act in self-defense. I'll be voting no.
For what purpose does the lady from Franklin, Representative Richardson, rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, to debate the bill.
The lady is recognized to debate the bill.
I would like to acknowledge here that a lot has been said, and I'm not going to repeat any of it. But anytime we have actions, there are always consequences. And my question, and I don't expect an answer, but it's a question that I want all of us to consider, is that once this bill is passed, are we ready for the consequences? Are we ready for the lawsuits? Are we ready for the broken hearts or the broken homes, the added additional people into prison? And if that doesn't happen, then great. But I do believe that we need to be mindful of the fact that passing this bill will have its consequences, and we as lawmakers will be responsible for those consequences. I ask you to think about that, and I will be voting against the bill. Thank you.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Durham, Representative Hall, rise?
Speak a second time on the bill.
The gentleman is recognized to debate the bill second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And although I rise to speak a second time, I want to make it clear this bill, for anybody's anybody who might be listening, this bill was never about taking away people's right to the Second Amendment to have a handgun. So that might have gotten confused. But I do know that as we started out, one of the first things we did was, and I say we, but one of the first things that was sought to be done was to ignore the best experts we probably have on guns, the sheriffs and the police chiefs and their recommendations. And I think we went down the wrong road when we did that. We should take the information we have available and the experts we have and value what they have to say about their experience as they deal with issues every day. I want to talk briefly about safety, because having a gun doesn't make you safe and it doesn't make the person around you safe. And I've said this before, and it bears repeating, at least in my mind, and maybe not anyone else's. But I've been in the courthouse before where fights have broken out, where people have gotten loose with guns, and the guns they took were those of some of our court personnel. So having a gun doesn't make you safe, and it doesn't necessarily make someone around you safe. We talk about having a permit to have a gun. That's great. Have a permit and have a gun. But again, do you take the responsibility to be trained with that weapon? Do you take the responsibility to have it safely stored? We understand North Carolina is the 5th state for guns showing up in other states being the source for guns showing up in other states at the scenes of crime. Are we exporting crime and making it easier? Have we done anything in this bill to make gun owners more responsible? I heard people say, well, gun owners are concealed carry permit are responsible. That may be. But are you responsible enough when you're dealing with an instrument of deadly force? So I think we have a question we have to answer. What have we done to make North Carolina safer? What are we doing now to make our community safer? And is this the route we want to take? Finally, I would ask again, and a lot of work was done to bring some people around to at least respecting our law enforcement community. And that's great. Maybe going forward we'll listen to them more. This is an issue that's going to continue to be in the forefront. And I hope we'll make a partnership with our sheriffs and police chiefs in what they're trying to do in our communities, as opposed to making them adversaries in the process. I'd ask you to vote against the bill.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Stanley, Representative Burr Rice?
Speak on the bill, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And first, Mr. Speaker, thank you and Leader Hager and Chairman Lewis for your efforts in working with the bill sponsors to help move this bill forward. There have certainly there's been a lot of rhetoric today, and I feel like it's deja vu. For those of you who've been here since 2011, when we passed our first large gun legislation in the General Assembly, since we've taken the majority, the rhetoric you've heard today was the same rhetoric you heard under House Bill 650, which is the Castle Doctrine and a number of other items in it, which, by the way, who signed that bill into law? Beverly Perdue signed that bill into law. The former Democratic governor of North Carolina signed that bill into law. House Bill 937 was passed in 2013. We heard the same thing 2 years ago. That there's going to be shootings in parks. There's going to be shootings at schools. There's going to be all these law-abiding citizens going out, grabbing their guns and shooting people. Well, it's not the law-abiding citizens that we've got to worry about. It's the criminals. It's the folks out here who don't care about that sign posted there. You know, we are doing everything we can to continue the efforts that we've been making since 2011 to expand the rights of law-abiding North Carolinians to carry, to protect their families, their friends, their neighbors. And along with that, these bills have also contained efforts to make sure that we're strengthening and preventing those with mental health problems, those with criminal records, from obtaining guns. This has been a two-pronged approach, and we have done that and made every effort to improve the rights that we, as law-abiding citizens and the people that we represent, should have. And I finish by saying that, we heard the stats mentioned earlier, and, that there have been lots of gun violence and deaths, but I didn't hear a breakout of those stats in terms of how many of those were concealed carry holders versus how many of those were folks just breaking the law. Or how about those people that were actually shot? How many of those individuals were concealed carry holders or gun owners who were at a location where they were prohibited from carrying a weapon and defending themselves? You know, let's look out for the law-abiding citizens. Let's give them the right to protect their families and themselves. And this legislation continues that. And I am certainly going to be proud to press the green button and help to move our state in the right direction and strengthening the rights of the people that we all represent and their right to carry.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Cabarrus, Representative Pittman, rise?
Speak on the bill.
The gentleman has the floor to debate the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I have been viciously attacked from various sources for introducing and supporting gun rights legislation, especially since my son shot himself earlier this year. You know, and I understand some of the thoughts and feelings that have been expressed by some of the folks here tonight, but I just tell you, I don't believe that the right of our citizens to keep and bear arms should be denied or diminished in any way because of my personal tragedy. And I wish we would all realize that you have a basic right to self-defense. That's what the right to keep and bear arms is all about. And, you know, a lot of things happen that we wish would not happen in our lives and in our world, but that doesn't take away that basic right of self-defense. I haven't been real happy with some of the changes that were made yesterday in this bill. I think it's been watered down, and I really wish that hadn't happened. But there's still a lot of good stuff in this bill. And so I would ask people to support it because it is a bill that supports the rights of our citizens. And so I'm going to vote for it, and I would ask others to do so in recognition of that right to self-defense and the right to keep and bear arms. Thank you.
Further discussion, further debate? If not, the question before the House is the passage of House Bill 562 on its third reading. Those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will open the vote. Representative Cunningham, does the lady wish to record? The clerk will lock the machine and record the vote. 78 having voted in the affirmative and 37 in the negative. House Bill 562 passes its third reading. It is ordered engrossed and sent to the Senate.